Thank you so much for clicking on my video, and if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. Today, we will be recapping part 2 of Spare by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. So if you have not read up until this point and you do not want to listen to any spoilers, come back when you're ready. But for those of us who are game, let's get into it. Once again, thank you so much for clicking on my video. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. I want to say a big hello to all of the members on my channel, and I'm going to curtsy to the royal court. Also, if you are here and you are a listener of Sweet Discernment, I really appreciate you listening to my podcast. So, the book is very successful. Before it even completed its first day after its release, it broke records. It broke records. The first, it became the UK's fastest selling nonfiction book ever. The only books to have ever sold more on their first day are Harry Potter books. So if you plan on being a successful writer, change your name to Harry. That's what I'm taking from this. It's all in the name. It's all in the name. So anyway, before we get into part 2, let me finish off part 1 because I realized after finishing my recap yesterday just how much content I had left before we got to part 2, and I was like, they probably think I'm a crazy person. Why did I stop at 50 when I only had a few more chapters to go? Anyway, it was really quick. We stopped off at the Not C costume and his repentance for that. Now, again, I do not represent the majority of the community that was directly offended by this act, so I cannot excuse anything. I don't have a heaven or a hell to put anybody in, but I respect the community and their feelings. Each and every individual person who had a feeling about this and is part of the community affected, I respect your feelings, and I am not excusing anything. I never want anybody to walk away thinking because Sharion likes a royal or a celebrity, our pain doesn't matter, and I don't want to watch her videos because I feel like she dismissed my pain. I never want to dismiss anybody's pain. Trust me, as a Black woman, I don't like when people do it to me. It is not up to me to forgive anybody for anything that did not directly affect me. However, I want to cover this part in the book, and according to my third party, non-excusing place in the matter, I'm just recapping it and giving my own personal opinion, but I respect the community affected. So he wore this Not C costume to a party thrown by one of William's friends at the behest, the encouragement, and even at times the goading of William and Kate. They also wore costumes that were not as risque. It's interesting they had the foresight to protect themselves on that front, but it seems like they had a lapse in judgment with Harry. Interesting pattern of events that we will continue to document as we recap Spare. So he went to Charles after the news broke that he wore this costume, and he was just getting lambasted everywhere. And Charles was actually compassionate to Harry's relief. He was very compassionate, but he said Charles did hold him accountable. Before we continue, I just want to say I respect Harry's recollection of his dad. I am not here to tell Harry or say that Harry is wrong about how he experienced his parents, because y'all know what I say all the time. You cannot tell someone more about their parent than they already know. You may have a difference of opinions, but since I'm recapping a memoir, I am not about to impose my third party, non-related, non-directly affected view on someone telling the world how his father made him feel. I'm also sharing in real time as we get through each part in the book. So I'm sure some of the things that Charles has done that we know of now, there will be a different tone at that point in the book, but we're not there yet. So I'm following through with the pace of the book. It's interesting, some of the things I have to say. I overestimate a lot of people. So the military refused to bar Harry from entering because of this incident. They said if he were in the military when it happened, we could address it. We can't address it because he's not in the military yet. However, Charles sent Harry because he had this desire to atone, and he repeatedly made that clear. Charles sent Harry to meet with the chief rabbi of Great Britain. And he said there, the rabbi was kind but very direct. He didn't mince words, and he condemned his mistake. He provided a lot of historical context and the realities of the Holocaust. And he made sure that Harry understood the severity of what he did, but he also made sure Harry didn't walk away feeling like this was something that he needed to hold as guilt in his heart. He said his desire for Harry is to learn from it, but to also do better and encourage others to do better. He said he didn't want him to be devastated, but he wanted him to do better and forgive. Harry then takes us into meeting Jamie Lava Pinkerton. I think I said that right. And it's his and William's new private secretary at that point. And he describes him as kind of a no-nonsense guy, a very widely respected man. He built a really strong relationship with Jamie, and he was very grateful for Jamie and his foresight. Here's why. He went to Jamie and asked for the secure files regarding Princess Diana's wreck. And he said Jamie discouraged it, but he continued and he just pressed forward. And so Jamie relented, but he did have the foresight to remove some of the photos that were a bit more detailed, to which Harry was very grateful. Harry didn't take seeing these photos well at all. Then he recognized that the accident was real. But he realized just how much of a part the paparazzi actually played, because they were even in the photos, their flashes were in the photos, and it haunted him that his mother's the last view his mother had on Earth was of paparazzi flashes. That just really crushed him. So, and I understood his feelings on that. He then takes us into the military boot camp experience. While there, a reporter from The Sun broke onto the grounds with a fake, I don't know if I can say this word on YouTube, B-O-M-B, on his chest. And he was trying to get to Harry, and he said that he was just trying to expose how unsafe Prince Harry was. Are y'all out of your rabbit ass minds? Who does that? Anyway, I see why he hates you people. Oh my gosh. So anyway, Harry said he loved the military. He said although the military felt like it could break people, he didn't feel like he could be broken because he already was broken. He was suffering greatly, and the idea of getting a new identity and being able to shed all the preconceived notions about himself, all the rumors about himself, just being able to stop carrying all that weight that came with Prince Harry, he said it was a relief. No matter how hard the military got, he said he would take the military, the boot camp time and time again over school any day. And you know what? I completely understand him. Some people just do not like, not the learning part, the format of learning in school is very different. Some people don't learn that way. Also, the idea of the environment of school can also play a big part in why kids don't succeed. Different environments nurture different types of people and different types of learners. So it's interesting to hear how he felt about school. I don't know if the environment was the issue. I'm just saying it could be a part of it. But he said he really wasn't trying to go back to school. So he loved the military. He got trench foot during a march during boot camp. And when he got trench foot, the medic told him that he didn't have to continue the march and that he could leave. And as he's sitting there on the slab, Sergeant Spence, one of the color sergeants, came over to him and said, hey, in a different tone that he usually used. Usually he was yelling, but he spoke to Harry with like respect and just like understanding. And he said, hey, I really think that you can do this. He encouraged him to try to push through the trench foot and really push forward. Here's the thing. It's noted multiple times in the book that Harry actually takes direction very well. He's great with authority and hierarchy. Who knew? And so that served him well in the military. But it's interesting to hear how a kind approach affected Harry, and it gave him the strength to push forward when he thought that he would give up. Sometimes the best way to get the best results out of people is to appeal to them as a human versus trying to bully them into submission. And that sentiment will come up later. The military served Harry in a lot of ways. And eventually he was promoted to Second Lieutenant Wales of the Blues and Royals, and he outranked William. One of the reasons for that is because William had to go to college. He wasn't allowed to take time to go straight to the military. He had to go to college because it was what was required of him. And so when he got out of college and joined the military, his little brother outranked him. That will come up later. He's still dating Chelsea Davy. And throughout his time in boot camp and in the early years of the military, the tabloids were still reporting on him, and they were still a problem for both him and Chelsea Davy. And one of the things that they published was that William left a voicemail pretending to be Chelsea. And then another thing they reported was that Harry had reached out to Jamie for help on a Sandhurst research project. Both items were true, and it made William and Harry very paranoid because they didn't know who was leaking that. He didn't really close that part out in part 2, so we really don't know who was saying that, but it made both men very paranoid. Now we finally get to part 2. Part 2 is titled Bloody But Unbowed, and this is during his time in the military, but it starts us off with the announcement that he will be deployed to Iraq, something he was very excited about and very ready to go. He had been training with these people forever, and he felt like they had a brother and a sisterhood. He wanted to have their back, they had his back, and they had a real strong bond, and he wanted to be in combat with them. But it was deemed too risky, not only to him, but to also to everyone that was around him at the time. When it was announced that he would go to Iraq, the insurgents announced that they were going to kidnap Harry. They said very awful things about unaliving him, and they even invoked Diana. They were cruel. One of the things they said was they planned to take his ears. So, yeah. So the deployment was called off, and he was understandably crushed. He was called a coward, some people saying that he invoked his princely privilege to not go, when in fact he really wanted to go. It just wasn't safe to go. He pondered at that time quitting the army, and even Chelsea was relieved, but she did understand that he wanted to be in the military because it fulfilled him, but she was relieved that he wouldn't be going to Iraq at that time. To cope with his devastation, he started drinking and partying again, which is something we kind of see a pattern of when he faces like severe blows. He kind of leans into this environment and this type of substance. He said that as the fallout from the Iraq deployment, the non-deployment progressed, he started getting severe anxiety about paparazzi. And he even said that paparazzi flashes made him hyper aware. And the paparazzi didn't just take photos. So when people talk about like the relationship the royals, but also celebrities have with paparazzi, it's not just photos. Even though that is intrusive, taking photos of people with a wide angle lens or a long reach lens and all that stuff, that is extremely intrusive. That type of voyeurism is not fair, it's not right, and there are so many human right violations when you do things like that. You cannot violate people's privacy. There's just some things people are entitled to, and private time is one of those things. So it's already a stripping of your sense of stability and safety. But paparazzi does a lot. They get in front of your cars, they climb on your cars, they will touch you. In some cases with Prince Harry, they were trying to provoke him to fight, would try to rile him up and get him to fight. They would hit him with their lenses, like bump into him and piss him off. It was a lot. Not intended to be treated like that. He's still human. Humans are not supposed to be treated like that. Animals aren't even supposed to be treated like that. If you approach an animal in that same way, you'll get eaten. And we seem to understand it when it comes to animals. We have all these respectful provisions around animals, but with people, we're like, oh, but you got a lot of money, so we can have your soul, right? No, you cannot have people's soul. So anyway, he leads us into the 10th anniversary of Princess Diana's passing. He and William decided to throw a concert. And one of the things that happened backstage was he said he was having he and William both were having an extremely tough time backstage. And Harry asked Elton John to perform Candle in the Wind, which is what he performed at Princess Diana's funeral. But Elton John decided not to. He said he didn't want it to be a somber occasion, so he chose not to. He sang Your Song. And this is a moment where we get a little clip of Harry singing, and it was really nice. I was like, wow, he has a pretty nice voice. And very brave of him to do that. So many people be like, I don't sing, so now. It was nice. He said when they went to go give their speech about Princess Diana, he essentially froze up. He didn't say any of the things that he would have loved to have said at that time. And he said he did shout out his military brothers and sisters and reiterate, you know, he appreciates what they are doing to keep the country safe. So it's really sweet. We then move into his return to the military, which he is very happy about. He visited his colonel to get back into operations, and at that point, he even threatened to leave. Like, if y'all don't give me something to do, I'm gonna leave the military. So they decided to train him for combat in Afghanistan, and they needed somewhere private to train him. And guess where they chose to send him? Right up near Sandringham. And he was very excited. He knew the land and the area well, and that really worked out for him for a lot of reasons. We'll get into it. While he was at Knight's Hill, again, he's up by Sandringham. So his dad came to see him. He drove his Audi to see Harry, but Harry was in the middle of work, and like real work. And so he just stopped by to say he was proud of Harry, and he could see that he was working very hard and he respected his work ethic. And this is when Harry gives us a little glimpse of Prince Charles's work ethic, which, again, this book is necessary for a lot of reasons, because I didn't realize Charles was just this hard worker. But Harry said he lived at his desk. Charles lived at his desk sometimes. He would just sleep on his desk from working so hard on all his initiative, mainly awareness for climate change. So while his dad was driving away in his Audi, he had a low flyover right over the Audi. But he said he spared him. So I thought that was a cute moment. So this is the point in the book where chapter 8 is where we get into the story of him driving through the same tunnel where Diana died. When he went to the Rugby World Cup in Paris, he had an Irish driver. The driver said, "What the F?" Why Harry mocked this man?
What the fuck?
That part made me laugh. But when he asked if you could take me to Pont de Lama Tunnel, the driver understood where he was going, and he was very reluctant, but he obviously relented. He said when he went through the tunnel, all doubt about Princess Diana possibly being in hiding faded away. From this point forward in the book, there's an awareness that wasn't present up until this point. There wasn't an awareness. There was this, before there was this, she disappeared, she's probably gonna come back for us. But now we see a lot more realism when he discusses not only Princess Diana, but also the accident. And to be fair, he discusses it a lot less in part 2 once he had the confirmation that she really did pass. He said he got the closure that he needed, but it didn't get rid of the pain. It just started the second leg of the pain. He said that night he didn't react well to that driving trial. And he started picking fights in bars. He got kicked out of a bar. He then tried to pick a fight with his bodyguard. He said his bodyguard essentially handled him with kid gloves. They knew where that was coming from, but good for the bodyguard for considering Harry's feelings first. He said he called William, and then that's when he found out William had done the same thing, had driven through the tunnel. One of the things that he mentioned was when they started discussing the facts of the accident, they realized just how little accountability the paparazzi and reporters and the British media took in that situation, although it was a major factor in the accident happening in the first place. And subsequently, the end result was Princess Diana's passing. And they considered reopening an inquiry, and they wanted to, but the higher ups encouraged them not to. Do with that what you will. So he gets to Afghanistan, and he walks us through his active war moments. He gives incredible detail. It's then that he hears his cover was blown. He's there for a while, and then he hears his cover was blown. He hears that the enemy is targeting a red fox, and it dawns on him, he's the red fox. So he has to be extracted. The reason this happened, and he was extracted by special forces, but the reason that this happened was because an Australian magazine outed his location, and then an American website posted the segment from the magazine. The enemies got a hold of it, outed where he was to the world, and they were coming for Harry. He said it was a tough adjustment for a lot of reasons. He found that he was way more quiet, a tad bit more introverted, And he had a frustration being back home with the people he knew in real life, with how lacking they were in their awareness of the very real war that was going on. And we kind of see him start to get impatient with them. He gives us his thoughts on Chelsea. And at this point, it's clear that they're probably not going to work out. Now we get to the point in which Harry decides he's going to be a pilot. He was encouraged by General Danner, and he recommended this because in this way he could still be in combat, he can still serve the military, but he can also kind of avoid paparazzi and journalists because he's up in the air. And so after some back and forth, he does relent and becomes an Apache pilot, although he did want to fly the Lynx. And for all the reasons that he gave to General Danner, General Danner like held firm and was like, I know you and I know your skill set, and this is what you need to do. You were made to be an Apache pilot. And it turned out to be a very successful experience for Harry, so he was right. He often talked about, or he had a segment where he talked about help for heroes. And when this organization, when he and Will reached out to this organization to see how they could be part of it, the organization agreed, and they sent them wristbands for Harry, Kate, and William to wear. So they wore them on an outing. The wristbands blew up, the organization blew up, and it really did help the organization, but also the people that it served. So Harry kind of got like back into the charitable works. It kind of sparked something in him. And we'll see that continue to show up throughout this part 2. So he decided that he wanted to help the organization in other ways. So he did. He went and spoke with veterans. He went and spent quality time. And he really got to know people outside of the cameras. He did this so many times, and only once out of the many, many times that he worked with Help for Heroes did the press know about it, because he only allowed the palace to confirm what he was doing one time. He was that ingrained, and it reminded me of the story of Meghan just instinctively going to help the victims of Grenfell Tower on her own without cameras. Even before her wedding, she just jumped into action. They are so equally yoked. So then Harry shares with us another scandal, and I don't see these things as scandals anymore. At the time they were probably pretty big, or they were pretty big, but I actually see these moments of him sharing his mistakes as not as downfalls or any of that stuff. I actually just see him being very accountable. I find that throughout this entire book, his aim is to be honest and accountable, and that's a common theme that you will see show up. It's important to be accountable. And so once when he was recording a video before his deployment back to Afghanistan, he was recording this video with his friends, and as he was going by each person, he says their name and something about them, and it's kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek video. He sent this video off to a person who was making like a farewell video for everybody, and when he sends it off, it blows up. And in the video, Harry referred to his Pakistani friend, Ahmed Raza Khan, as a slur. This was a learning moment for me. I've never used this term, but I just didn't know it was a slur. And I don't even think I've heard it before this. So it was interesting, but I had no idea this was a slur. And this is why it's important to not only be accountable, but share your firsthand experience, because people learn and grow even before a mistake occurs. So this is why it is important to not be ashamed of your mistakes, but to own them and make yourself better with them. So he used the shortened word for Pakistan to refer to this man, Ahmed Raza Khan, and he got in a lot of hot water. He definitely repented right away. He admitted in the book, I had no idea this was a slur. I didn't either. And so I'm glad he apologized and he did what it took to make it right. He definitely vowed to do better. And he said Ahmed Raza Khan didn't take offense to it, but he definitely forgave him. So this is when we start seeing tensions with Prince William. Well, we're kind of seeing them throughout, but this is when it's really becoming noticeable. It's almost like he couldn't hold it in, but also he had way more access. He's getting way more coverage. And this is when his life is really picking up speed, his public life. So he has more opportunities to show who he really is. And this is when Harry sees who he really is as well. During an agreed joint interview with William and Harry in a airport hangar, they are talking about their experience in the military, and they are in their military garb, and it just looks like this really fun video. I watched the video after reading this part of the book. It's interesting. In the video, in the interview, he makes a number of comments that kind of slight Harry. Harry acknowledges they used to banter all the time. They love banter. And for the most part, banter between siblings is very normal. But there are lines. And so this is one of those moments where Harry started to realize a line was being crossed. He notes that William makes reference to Harry being a slob, not cleaning up after himself, and snoring really loudly. He also makes reference to the fact that he has to cook all of Harry's meals because Harry's irresponsible.
An awful lot. He needs a lot of help. I cook him and feed him basically every day. He does do a bit of the washing up, then he leaves most of it in the sink, and then it comes back in the morning and I have to wash it up.
Oh, the lies.
Yeah, unbelievable.
56.
Over to you.
But Harry, seriously.
Harry said in the moment it caught him off guard, so he kind of gave his brother a look because, one, due to being in the military, he was extremely clean and polished. He kept his room and his quarters very clean and very put together. So he was not slovenly or slobbish. He also made a note that they had very separate rooms and they were very far apart. And even if he doesn't snore, but even if he did, William wouldn't know about it. And so this is when he first starts getting a tinge of, are you competing with me? And he keeps having that moment throughout the book. Now, again, Harry does an amazing job of tone management. So as he's moving through the book, he addresses each incident with the tone of the relationship at that time. So obviously, if I'm talking about a pattern of behavior and I'm talking about I'm on my last leg with this person, I'm going to be talking about that in the tone that I'm in now after they have exercised all of my patience and we've been through the extent of the rigmarole. But Harry is writing a book, and so he's not approaching each incident as he feels about it now. He's approaching each incident with the tone that he felt then. This is important because it helps us move through these moments in his life with a level of honesty that we really wouldn't get otherwise. And it's important for us to be able to transport ourselves there with Harry mentally. He's doing this on purpose. So I know people are like, he was too nice to Charles and he's not recollecting everything Charles did. He's moving us through his life in chronological order. And he's giving us emotional authenticity by not sharing it in his views now, but giving us the perspective he had then. Also get to see the gradual build in real time from things being normal to things slowly becoming not all right to things slowly becoming ruptured as they are right now. We don't want it to start off with, it's ruptured right now and this is why, and I knew that man didn't like me then. It doesn't make for an enjoyable story. Its readers can't withstand high level energy and frustration for a full 481 pages. So he's gradually moving us through these time periods with the tone that was present then. This is when he first starts recognizing tensions with William, and he starts realizing this mofo is competing with me. I thought we was cool. Like, he's just like, are we not adults? Like, are you still doing this? And that's an interesting moment to have with a person when you realize like you've grown and they haven't. And most people, like, it seems like Harry extend empathy, understanding, but patience, because they're like, everybody grows at their own pace in certain areas. And so we see an insurmountable level of patience from Harry throughout this entire part 2, which makes a lot of sense why he's reached the summit that he's at right now. He's done everything he could. Feels like William was a bit resentful because, like I mentioned before, William wasn't allowed to just enter the military straight away. He had to go to college first, whereas Harry was allowed to kind of pick his path. And he felt like William held some kind of resentment for that because it wasn't Harry's doing, it was the Queen's doing. And it wasn't William's first choice to go about the order of events that way. And so at this point, Harry outranks William because of that. And so obviously this doesn't sit well with William. We'll come back to that outranking. So at this point, the guys go to Lesotho and they spend a lot of time with Prince Seso. They work on their charities. They really get back into the position of giving back. He said that prior to his second tour in Afghanistan, his friends Tej and Mike talked to him about, you know, we know you love Africa, but it's time that you change the dynamic of the relationship, because you are in a space where you are taking. You come here, you get to have these amazing experiences, you get to have this amazing time and use our resources, but I don't see you giving back, which is the way of UK and Africa. And so they're recognizing that. And so at this point, he decides to start spending a lot more time giving back. And we see this continue throughout part 2. When they get back home, the palace announces William plans to marry Kate. And it's interesting because they spent all this time in Lesotho together, one-on-one time, and not once did William mention it. Another thing to note is that the tabloids filled with false stories from beginning to end. They said that Harry was inspired by William and Kate's love, and it was something that really moved him so much that he gave his mama's ring to William, the sapphire. And Harry says,
"An absolute rubbish. None of it ever happened."
"Bullshit. Not true. I never had the ring to give. When it was first left to me, I gave it to William early on when we were younger because he asked for it. I didn't have any use for it, and I gave it to him then. It had nothing to do with Kate in particular. William already had the ring." And so they're already starting the sacrifice to spare for the image of the heir. And it's very obvious, but it's also very frustrating because you were talking about some intimate family moments. There was never this big heart-to-heart family moment between the two guys. There was never this great giving you the ring because I love your relationship with Kate. None of that. They use that to beef up the excitement for the wedding. They just lie on that man. So William's wedding. This is when we start getting a glimpse of what I call Todger tales. Now, I don't know about you, but I used to watch a lot of public access television, and one of the things that used to come on PBS was Dragon Tales. And I don't know where this freaking memory popped out from, but when I started reading the excerpts about his Todger, why did my brain tell me Todger Tales, Todger Tales, it's almost time for Todger Tales? And I was, now every time I heard the word or read the word in the book, I was just like, So yeah, Harry had some issues with his Todger. Now, here's what happened. He was invited to go on a trek to the North Pole. Harry has lived 1,000 lives. This is how you do your 20s, though. He was invited to go on a trek to the North Pole. He thought it was an amazing experience. While there, he did miss a little bit of training, and he didn't realize he wasn't supposed to work up a sweat, but they were moving like large things, large items. They're also trekking in this extreme cold, but they're also working really hard with these packs on their back. He's like pouring sweat. Well, the reason you don't want to sweat in the North Pole is because the sweat will freeze. His shirt got frozen, his clothes got frozen, and he got frostbite on his cheeks, on his ears, on the tips of his fingers, and another tip of his Todger. And so he suffered with that. And so when he got to William and Kate's wedding, he still had burnt up Todger. I mean, come on. I'm glad he shared the story. Like, the way Tom Bradby acted as if Harry was just like slanging dick. He was very tactful in the way that he shared this story, and I appreciated that because this is a sensitive matter for him above all else. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want to just be out here Todger telling it up. He has reasons why discretion works in his favor in this situation. However, in this moment, he decided to give us the real, and this is exactly why I love memoirs that are honest, because you might not like everything that's in the memoir, but it's honest. And I appreciate it because I thought it was funny. I thought it was very funny. So someone recommended, and he told his dad this, and his dad and his friends thought it was hilarious. Someone recommended he use Elizabeth Arden on it. And he said once he opened it, he smelled his mom's creams that she used from Elizabeth Arden, and it brought back all the memories that he had. Now, I do know I have heard a time or two that smells recall memories better than any other sense. So like you can see something, you can touch something, you can taste something, you can hear something, but when you smell something, it can actually provide better memory recall than any other sense. So it makes sense that he would have had this really weird experience treating an injury like that, but then also remembering his mom. And it feels like throughout his life, there are moments where her memory shows up, but I actually prefer to think of it as she shows up to check on her baby at the weirdest times, but at the times when he needs her most, when he is the most lost. So I thought that was a very funny story. He talked about William and Kate's wedding very beautifully. He had nothing but glowing things to say about Kate. He made it a point to say that Kate looked beautiful walking down the aisle. He said that he was not the best man, although the palace thought it was better for optics for him to appear as the best man. But William did not choose him to be the best man because he wanted his friends to be the best men. And in order to protect their privacy, because they were normal citizens, they didn't announce their names. But also, he didn't trust Harry to give a speech. Harry agreed. He describes this as a very funny moment of them imagining what Harry probably would have said. And then Harry did give a speech at the dinner, a very short speech, and he made a lot of very funny jokes, but it described the moment of them walking out of the church. He described that moment as feeling happy for them, but also very somber because Westminster Abbey is where they said goodbye to their family during their funerals. It's also a crypt. And also he felt like it was goodbye to William. And this is when we get this amazing quote. He says, "Each new identity assumes the throne of self, but takes us further from our original self, perhaps our core self, the child. There is a purity of childhood which is diluted with each iteration." I love that quote, and he is absolutely right. It's tough to grow up because our core self is so innocent. But in order to survive in the world, in each lifetime, we have to evolve and adapt. And then with each generation, we have to continue to evolve and adapt. And it's just one of those things, in order to survive life, that child can't stay. So it's interesting to hear him say that and then go immediately into this milestone of turning age 25. 25 was a very pivotal age for me as well. I feel like I did a lot of growing up. The prefrontal cortex is fully developed usually at that time, between the ages of 25 and 27, I believe it is. And so you start to get a certain awareness and a certain cognizance that you didn't have before, and you're able to make much better decisions, more sound decisions, and you're just more capable as an adult mentally. So he decided to visit Botswana with friends before he went on his second tour to Afghanistan as an Apache pilot. He says that during a military exercise that's necessary in order to progress and go back into combat, during the training, during this exercise, it's to test their will and also their skill in the event that they are kidnapped, and the intent is for them to escape an invasion. And so before they went into this practice or this exercise, they were studied. All their social media, everything that's known about them publicly, they were studied in the way that if they were kidnapped, kidnappers would do. He said the drill was particularly tough. He said, at one point he said they bust in on us. We were lying in bed, sleep. And he said that they saw them naked. They were stripped naked. Like, they were really put through it. Harry was spit on, pushed up against a wall, made to kneel. Like, they really abused this man. And he said all of that he could withstand. But at one point, his bunkmate, Phil, was tortured with comments about his girlfriend that these people learned from social media. And again, this is a drill, but Phil was just beside himself. They then decide to try and poke at Harry. And they pull Harry into this drill by bringing up Diana to test his will. And when I tell you, he sounded like he wanted to whoop everybody's ass. I agree. Like, that type of trigger has to be addressed, but also there is a such thing as too far. But if you are kidnapped, they're not going to be considerate. But I trust and believe that if you go into combat, you know how brutal things could be for you, and you would prepare for an event like that anyway. I don't know that that's something that would necessarily need to run through, but I'll say this. They know best, but this is a moment where I doubted their tactics. I'm not going to lie. I trust them, but I doubted their tactics. I just was like, what good is that going to do? He said it was very moving in a bad way. And once the drill was over, one of the instructors checked in with Harry and said that actually did go too far. Unfortunately, they didn't know enough about him to use a trigger point. So they used what they had, and Harry was just like, okay. And honestly, same Harry, because there's no apologizing your way out of that. Bitch, you talked about my mama. Are you crazy? And it shows the length that they go through to train their military, and it shows what he was willing to go through in order to fight for his country. He was very much a committed protector of the crown. Before his deployment, this is I'm talking about his Apache training, but before his deployment, he also decided to go to Vegas. One of the things that happened in Vegas was he went and had a good time with friends, but they got him to go by saying carpe diem. He said he had a great weekend and that they played blackjack while also drinking. And then they moved over to playing pool. And then the ladies who were at the blackjack table, who looked, as he described, dodgy, came over to play pool with them. And then Harry initiated the strip pool idea. Harry, you had to be more careful. He know now, but you gotta be more careful. You can't trust everybody. And that's something he notes, that throughout his life, he has been very trusting. And it's led to some pretty bad decisions. So he said that they were playing strip pool. He lost and had to strip naked. Wasn't a big deal. Went to sleep that night. Woke up the next morning. His face and his naked ass is all over the papers worldwide. And he's embarrassed. He's humiliated. He went home to talk to Charles at Balmoral. And Charles was actually bemused, as he put it. He said he was very gentle and he sympathized. The military didn't give two shits. They let him come on and enlist, or not enlist, they let him deploy. It was no problem. He ended up getting a promotion to Captain Wales, which we have a whole video on this channel about Captain Wales. He said at one point, the British press compromised his location again. This is the second tour they've done this on. It resulted in the attack and the death of 2 American soldiers, as well as many injuries to British and American soldiers. The enemy announced that they had intended to capture Harry. So he has consistently had a target on his back, and the press has played a part in that. The fact that y'all want this man to let up is insane to me. The press killed his mama. The press has tried to kill him multiple times. Like, what do you want him to do? Just die? I don't get it. Anyway, he explains in great detail, but with great tenderness, the art of and the necessary action of kills in the war. He acknowledged that he has 25 kills. It's not something he's proud of, but it's something he acknowledges because it is part of his war effort in order to keep humanity and the world safe from terrorists, and it's what he needs to do. It's not something he likes, but it's something that needs to be done, and it's something he trained to do, and he has to do it to help people stay safe. And I completely agree. He has never had one unjustified kill. He has never had a civilian kill. And so the shock from the press when he admitted to killing 25 people was shocking to him, because do you not understand the vestiges of war, or you don't get it? And so he was really beside himself about how people freaked out when he said, yes, I have killed people. He was also beside himself. I mean, people were also beside themselves when he said, you know, the way he just kind of adapted to being an Apache pilot. He said the controls are a lot like video games, and I'm good at video games. And he said that people made the assumption that he reduced war to just playing a video game, and these people aren't real people, which is not what he said. I think he handled this passage with such great respect to all involved. He was just very matter of fact, but he was also very gentle. And he didn't make light of war at all. He also didn't make light of his contribution. He could have easily just been like, no, I haven't killed anybody. But he is very much a matter of public interest, and he has to be honest. And he also has to do what's necessary when you're in the military. about to say his first solo tour representing the Queen was to the Caribbean. It went fantastic. It went really well, and people made sure to include the spirit of Diana in that tour. So goes over his experience after his second tour in Afghanistan. He did a tour in America to help Hurricane Sandy victims. And while there, he attended the War Games. And this is where he got inspired for the Invictus Games. So he said when he got home, on the way home, he was just this idea of like, how can we include like injured veterans in a game of sorts in this way? And he's just brewing with ideas. He prepared a whole presentation for the Royal Foundation in order to ask for funding and representation in it. Asked for funding. He pitched the Royal Foundation, got approved, and he only got approved for a $500,000 grant, which would be funded by the Endeavor Fund. This is something that Harry created in order to help veterans recovery specifically. So once he got this approval, mind you, the Royal Foundation has £7 million of funding, and he only got approved for $500,000, which would come from the Endeavor Fund as well as donations. So he went to William, who is married and doing well, but William and Kate are out of commission because they are developing their family. And he said William was very upset about it. He was like, you should have come to me first. Now, here's the thing. As a leader, wouldn't you want people taking initiative and handling things that can be taken care of outside of you and then coming to you when it's time for your involvement? I think this is the more appropriate route. You don't want people dependent on you as a leader. A leader creates more leaders. A leader creates a well-oiled machine, not a, well, again, this is someone who's mentally designed to think of oneself first, which is messed up. So again, he realized William's rivalry towards me is even interrupting the kind of experience I can give to veterans, the kind of care and the kind of help and aid that I can provide for veterans. His issues with being competitive with his little brother are impeding on the amount of care and aid that veterans are receiving. This man has no limits. So it's this point that we get to his post-war life, and he's trying to figure out what he does next. He essentially lives in a basement. He lives like below the palace. This is his first place by himself, and he got approved to live here. And as he's staying here, he only has 3 big windows. And so he's not happy with his living quarters, but at this point, he is trying to just get wrapped up in the Warrior Games, but his anxiety is becoming an issue. And it dawns on Harry, after giving it some deep thought and some friends pointed it out, Harry is suffering from PTSD. He starts realizing, like, I've been in close proximity to PTSD for so long. I don't know why I never made the connection. But it's then that he realizes that he's actually really suffering, and it's not PTSD from the war. He thinks that he really experienced PTSD from the death of his mom. And this is one of those very powerful moments in the book where people are probably enlightened in large part that you can receive PTSD from life, not from these from war. He starts looking for a resolution. At one point, he actually talks to Charles, and Charles sends him to a doctor, but it's a general practitioner. And so it's not like a psychotherapist. He eventually talks to William, who witnessed a panic attack in the back of his Range Rover. Harry was sitting in the back riding somewhere with Kim. He was riding somewhere with Kate and William, and for some reason, Harry got triggered during the drive. It was taking a really long time, and he started having a full-fledged panic attack in the back seat. It was after this that William encouraged him to seek psychotherapy, and he said he tried, and one therapist even diagnosed him with PTSD, but he said it was never a match, and that is something that happens. I'm a huge proponent of mental health therapy, behavioral health therapy, psychotherapy. You got to remember, although these are professionals, people are still people, and it sometimes just it doesn't work out. And so it doesn't work out all the time. He also experimented with psychedelics, and then he also experimented medicinally. And he said, yes, it pulled down the wall, but as soon as the effects of the psychedelics wore off, the anxiety and the stress came back. So he takes us on a few experiences. He is building Invictus in this section. Part 2 is when he is getting the idea for Invictus, but we watch him walk through that process, get the funding, work with Michelle Obama, and Idris Elba. He also goes to America and tries like real tequila for the first time. He goes to a party at Courtney Cox's house and he has a huge trip. I won't share that part because when I read it, I could not stop laughing. Like, the majority of this you're going to have to hear in Harry's words. That's why I put the disclaimer at the front. Like, don't watch this if you have not read the book or listen to the audio version, because you're gonna want to see it firsthand. That's why I'm kind of glossing over the story. I'm just not giving detail. But the whole story of him tripping, I was cackling. Then you know, one of the funny things that he mentioned in the book is that in 2013, you know, when he was trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life and kind of the next steps in his life, he binged Friends, the whole series. So fast forward, he goes to America. He's 29 years old. He goes to America. I think he's 29 or his late 20s or early 30s at this point. But he goes to America with some friends, tries the tequila, has this trip. But the party is at Courtney Cox's house. And he's a self-identified Chandler. And he's like trying to work up the courage to like have this conversation with her. His experience, he met Batman. He met someone who he thought was Christina Aguilera, and you've got to listen to it and read it. Feel free to share your opinion in the comments or the live chat regarding that part, but it was very funny. He also shares about Cressida Bronas and how she was one of the first people he could ever talk to about Princess Diana. He said she had just a tender nature about her, but it was also like a curious but considerate nature to where he felt comfortable opening up. And while he felt extremely bonded to her after they took a ski trip, he realized very shortly after that this is not the person for him, just not in a romantic light. He said he would always care for her, but it would never be in that manner. And so she probably felt the same in the way that he depicted it. I think he acknowledged that she felt the same. And so he actually broke up with her, and it was more of a mutual breakup. It wasn't this catastrophic thing. He felt very strongly that she felt the same. But it's good to know that he ends things amicably. Really sad to hear this part of his journey, because we know as the reader how much he wants to be a father and a husband. And to hear how it's just kind of like these false starts, it's a lot. And you really want to root for him. Now, it's great being on this side of things and knowing that he had the best option. And I think it's a testament to the fact that, you know, God is always on time. And so while we may think we're hitting dead ends, we're actually hitting very necessary reroutes. Some things are supposed to happen the way they're supposed to happen in their own time. And Charles and Camilla condemned Will and Kate consistently for trying to steal their thunder. They kind of leaned on Harry to help back them up. And because they were on maternity and paternity leave, they were on parental leave, they weren't getting as many front page appearances. So people were saying they weren't working, but they were building a family. And so Harry bore the brunt. This is Harry's words. Harry bore the brunt of the threesome, and he really supported them when they were just getting hell beat down on them, Charles and Camilla. And we're starting to see like the long-term effects of Camilla's presence, but also the lack of parenting from Charles is starting to make a very big statement in the fact that he refuses to protect his sons and daughter-in-law from his very conniving and calculated wife. Just my take on the book. And so we're starting to see how deep these wounds are so silly, how the types of ridiculous matters that ruin relationships. At one point there's like a kerfuffle because Kate is going to a sports club or a tennis club, and they're like, well, she can't get a photo holding a tennis racket because that would deflect from Charles and Camilla's appearance, and we want them to get the front page. But if Kate holds a tennis racket, she'll get front page. You know what? Listen, I don't claim to understand royal life because I'm not in it. I just talk about it, and that is just ridiculous to me. Some more things. William talking about Harry can't work or do his work or center his focus in Africa because that's William's thing. And at that point, it's just getting really ridiculous. They actually almost come to blows in front of a group of childhood friends because William likes to frame everything as if it's either his way or he allowed him to do it. So we talked about Harry going to the North Pole. Apparently that made William insanely jealous. And so William got upset and he said, well, I let Harry go to the North Pole. And Harry depicts this as William is getting to a point where he just savagely, openly, and aggressively pulls rank anytime he feels like it. Whereas in part 1, he shows us the proper but subtle growth of their relationship and how their bond was never as tight as people assumed it was. People more so imposed their own view of Harry and Will. But after part 1, he starts to recognize as adults the awareness that he's now acquired, especially after having lived on his own, especially after having his own independent experiences outside of the royal family and really coming into his own as a man. The awareness is very clear in part 2. And it's exactly why I'm glad he's writing this the way he wrote it. And he gradually peels back layers on each family member. William pissed off the press by denying a certain level of access to Kate and the kids as they were building their family shortly after Charlotte was born. He also made comments dismissing Brexit and pissed off the press. And so they started targeting William, and it became like a problem. So Harry tried to deflect the press while not assuming the weight of the press either. One of the things that he talks about is how people used to go in on his clothes. As someone who valued his time in combat and really saw the world at its worst, he just didn't put value in fashion and clothes. He put value in like his service to others. But, now that he was out of the military and having to operate in day to day, and he was a full-time working royal, so he would be doing appearances, he didn't have day-to-day casual clothes like that. People used to make fun of the hole in his shoe. People was talking about his pants was too long. His shirts were always wrinkled. They didn't have an idea that he was, as he said, drying his shirts on top of a radiator. And so another point that he made was that he would shop at bargain stores to buy clothes, particularly TK Maxx. He had a whole system where he would go in the last 5 minutes of the store's opening, and like the last 5 minutes, and just buy a whole lot of stuff in his size. And he wasn't really particular, but he said he would have to shop like discount stores. Prince Harry had to shop discount to get clothes. He said his dad's allowance covered clothes every year, but it was for formal occasions, not for casual clothes. Meanwhile, he felt like he was this invisible individual because in the royal family, when you're not married, you're essentially second class. And the fact that he was also a spare, he was second class. He also shares with us some more just raggedy ass developments with the media. Angola, he went to Angola and he worked with the same charity, Halo Trust, that his mother worked at, well, that she worked with, excuse me. And she spotlighted this charity, and when he got there, he realized it had stalled. So in order to revive it again, he walked in her steps, and he also wore the same protective gear. He walked the same route, which we talked about here, to help it to get revived, because he said it essentially broke his heart to see all her work just kind of stalemated without the attention it deserved. Also, he talked about being warned against Americans. Now get this, y'all. In this, I love a good full circle moment. He talked about being warned about Americans. He said that he was always told that Americans were too direct, too rich, too happy, too proud, too loud. And all these descriptions, he was like, I actually like America and I like Americans. We got him here in America right now, and that's all that matters. So this section was really good because it helped us to get more of a view of who Harry was in the military, which is really what I was looking forward to second. The most I'm looking forward to the Meghan years. Hearing him share just how far down the ladder he was, as he calls it, the pecking order, is pretty shocking. There's a moment where he talks about moving home post-war life, and he's assigned this home, and it's essentially underground. And it's under Kensington Palace. It's halfway underground, and he only has 3 windows that provide light into his unit, and it's underneath offices and all that. And he said that Mr. R, one of the Queen's employees or whatever, one of the Queen's staff, is parking right in front of his windows and blocking all the light. And so when he writes a very nice note, it's like, hey, would you mind parking somewhere else so that I can have some light, he gave Harry the brush off, and it was very rude and very disrespectful. And so Harry's just kind of like, what the heck? Like, it shows just how far down the ladder it went. And Mr. R felt comfortable taking this note and his very ill-tempered, disrespectful comments to the queen. Now, the queen didn't intervene, like she didn't say anything to Harry, but it was a moment for Harry to realize, like, I'm so far down the ladder that this man feels comfortable talking crap about me to the queen, but also my granny. Now, I would hope that the queen gave him a real what for, but based on how the rest of the story goes, I don't think so. I don't think so, because she was first and foremost for the monarchy, family second, as we know. He also talks about Mr. R's wife cutting her children's hair and throwing the hair out of the windows. And if his windows were open, hair would just get in, get all in his mouth, in his food. Like, they truly had this man living like Harry Potter under the stairs. And then, if it wasn't bad enough, he was so gracious about it, but I wasn't. Because you just don't have to do this. Mrs. R, the woman of the man parking in front of his only light source, is parking in Diana's old spot. See, the way my petty is set up, both cars would have had a battery missing the next day. Like, no, I need my light and leave my mama's parking spot. What is wrong with you? So anyway, we see him on this quest to find a wife for a number of reasons. He wants to be a husband. He wants to be a dad more than anything else in the world. But one of the things I say is our own plans fail us so often, and God's plan is the best, because had he not had these experiences, he would have probably not felt as fulfilled when he finally became a parent and a husband, because he got to live a full life, like traveling, going on adventures, dating, and figuring out what you like, what you don't like, making friends, making surrogate family. He's lived an amazing life, and this book does an amazing job of taking us on each journey, which is why I'm purposely leaving out a ton, because I don't want to ruin the fun of the book itself. I hope you enjoyed this recap. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. What did I leave out? What are your favorite parts of part 2? Leave it in the comment section below or in the live chat. I want to go ahead and say a huge hello and a thank you to everyone who has sent me very kind words on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting. If you have not already, feel free to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell. Don't forget to hit that join button if you want to join. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. I will see you next time. Bye.